Can you check now real quick? Because it says that I'm streaming, but it also says that it says live.
Yeah.
All right.
Get an advertisement right now.
Okay. All right. So it seems like this is live again. All right. So like I was saying before I was cut off, this is going to be mostly like a coloring stream. We're trying to put together some client work, and this was just kind of a goofy, dumb idea that we had put together. So consequently, this stream is going to be kind of goofy and dumb. But I'll try and be as at least informative as possible. But this is kind of just a kind of a fun, stupid thing that we're just capping off the week with. So I'm gonna get started. So like I was saying before, the premise of this drawing, we were putting together some ideas for this kind of like distracting demon thing for a game pitch we're doing. The idea being that this thing was preventing the player from operating the vehicle safely by just being in your face and just loud and obnoxious. So I just kind of gave it this multi-armed tech demon type thing. And I'm just gonna kind of get to coloring it. This is probably not gonna be the longest stream, but try and see how far I can go. And whereas the last time we did something involving like coloring or painting, Andy did more of like a painterly rendered style. I'm gonna kind of be doing more of like a cell shaded, more comic-y style. Just I figured that kind of fit the character. And because he's wearing loud and obnoxious sunglasses, I'm also wearing loud and obnoxious sunglasses. But we'll see how long I can keep that up because I'm having a hard time seeing color with this. But that just means that the color will be brighter. So I kind of worked out the idea that I wanted this to be kind of like neon and loud and in your face. So kind of go up to my color picker right here. I think I want to start out with pinks, like a hot pink, kind of see where that goes. And after that, I'll do some tweaking kind of to see where the hue and values and stuff kind of sit. So usually what I do, and this is Photoshop. Sometimes I color in Clip Studio, sometimes I color in Photoshop. I kind of start out just blocking in all the color shapes. There's a few ways that you can do that. If I had put together a little bit more ahead of time on this, sometimes what I'll do is I'll just kind of select everything like this, kind of select the whole line art, and then make a mask on top of it. So you can see that if I go on top of this and then create a mask, it means that anytime I'm drawing with inside, I chose white, but anytime I'm drawing within the space covered by the mask, you can see that it'll kind of just not go outside the lines. And I did a really rough, bad mask, so that's why, but it basically gates off where your color is going to go relative to the line art. But just for this, just because it's probably not going to be too many different colors, at least initially on the color blocking, I'm just going to kind of paint at it and make sure I'm underneath my line art. And what I'm probably going to do is just block out kind of generally where I want the color, and then fill it in with the paint bucket tool. I'm doing this quickly, and I'm actually doing it with a brush that doesn't have any. It does have shift dynamics. And I'll go through once this is done and kind of clean it up a little bit. Really what I'm trying to do right now is just get everything down. I don't actually do this type of coloring in Photoshop that much, but I have a ton of brushes that I want to play around with for this, so that's why I'm doing it in here. It's actually being a little laggy. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'll probably clean it up a little bit, but I want it to be kind of as close as possible, just so I don't have to do extra work. This is kind of the boring initial phase. Just filling everything in. So some of this, um, especially with like robot kind of stuff, and I think I said this the last time or the first time I streamed, is like you want things to look kind of manufactured. So there was a while when I was doing robots or even kind of anything where I just like put a ton of color, just like make everything look different, like varying it up a lot. But in actuality, I mean, this is kind of more on the extreme spectrum of that. But like anything that's designed or manufactured in any kind of like lab or construction type thing is going to be pretty uniform across the board because I mean it's being built for that or being built to perform a function. So I try to make sure that I keep things kind of at least stylistically uniform across the board. Uh, so I'm not going to add too many different colors because that also can be a little bit distracting as well. I mean, you don't want to just overload someone. Um, I'll add like flourishes and pops of color, but I'm going to keep the base of everything the same. But some of these things, like these little, I guess, like connecting parts for the arms and stuff, I'm gonna probably do a different color for. Maybe it was a part of the metal that wasn't entirely finished, so I kind of want to make it maybe like a gray color, just to break it up a little bit, but not too much. Um, I'm gonna have to take these off. That's a Nazi color. And right now I'm just kind of using a generic Photoshop brush. It's got a little bit of pressure sensitivity, uh, but just it doesn't have any transference on it, so it's going to be the same opacity regardless of what I do. If I was painting, I might use another, like a more brush that has a little bit of opacity transferred to it, just so that I can blend a little bit more, but I'm not as worried about blending color doing this kind of coloring style. Uh, this is a little bit more of a graphic read. Um, there. Just kind of keeping going on this. And then this little orb in the center will probably be like its power source. So just differentiate that color. Um, and you can actually see the line of art kind of clips over on that, which I will, I guess I can just do this, just to kind of push it back. Uh, I'll give it a bright orange head-ish. actually going to do this on a separate layer just so I can kind of paint in on the background. And I actually had a hat as a kid that was kind of this color, so I wore it everywhere. There's a hat that was like this color, and then I had a t-shirt with the Black Ranger on it from Power Rangers, and I wore those two things everywhere. Just a few more tweaks. Then I'm gonna clean up the lines a little, or the fill a little bit, and then get to shading and kind of putting this thing together a little bit better. I think that's about good. So go through, clean everything up. Just making sure that, I mean, as is the case, if you're being a perfectionist about a coloring book, you don't want stuff to bleed out just so that it looks a little bit more polished. And with something like cell shading, because you tend to, I mean, have at least some bit of an outline, not always as thick as this, sometimes it's going to be pretty thin, but you have a little bit of indication of outline, and when that's the case, you want to make sure that nothing is bleeding through because it can really kind of break the illusion of what you're doing. Like anime and cartoons are an example of sort of cell shading that tends to have like bleed right up into the line art and have much more of a subtle line art. There are those shows that have like that really thick kind of style to it, but that's not totally what we're going for here. Almost done. If there's a few things that aren't quite perfect, I can just go back and kind of fix them as I kind of go through to a final polished pass on this. Right. This will be the last thing, and then I'll start to get into the next part of this. Alright, let's do that. Alright, so I kind of worked out where all the basic colors are going to go, and now what I want to do is I want to start blocking out the shadows. And first thing I'm going to want to do is kind of define a light source, and just given the way that this looks and the way I know that I kind of want to frame this eventually, we're going to have that light source kind of going. And sometimes it helps just draw an arrow, but kind of going down this way. So what that means is you're going to see most of the light hitting kind of this part of his frame right here, and that's going to obviously cast shadows in certain places. And when you're blocking out shadows, what you really want to do, especially because with cell shading, you're not rendering things out as fully, you really want to make sure that everything registers well with as few layers of color as possible. And you can kind of layer on shadows as much as you want, but like after a certain point of adding shadows and shadows and shadows, you're functionally painting, and then you might want to do a fully more rendered thing. But I can already tell kind of where things are gonna, like where some shadows are gonna get cast, and part of that is knowing that this head right here extends past where that body is. So I know that pretty much most of at least his body and then this other side of him is going to be cast in shadow. And that's just based on the fact that it's underneath. So even if there is light coming from this direction, the shadow cast from his head down to the rest of his body is going to obscure most of that. And I'll kind of fudge it a little bit just to make it a little bit more interesting. But I know that for right now, I'm going to want to cover that whole thing in shadow. So the way I tend to do that is with different blending modes on layers. I tend to use hard light for my initial shadow, depending upon what effect you're going for. Soft light, multiply, or overlay can be good too, but I find that the hard light setting tends to lend a little bit harsher of a contrast, which is what I'm looking at just for my initial blocking out of shadows. And I chose a color that's not dark enough. And also it's on vivid light. So go to hard light, and then you can start blocking it in. So that's actually now too dark. I don't want to start too dark because I'm actually going to be adding probably one or two more value layers on top of that. So I initially just want to block out and make sure everything is tracking correctly. So we're going to start filling that in. And obviously, you know, you can tell if this is the underside of his head, it's obviously going to have shadow on top of it. And then just filling in the rest of the body. Things like this shoulder right here will be casting a shadow, so I'll get to that when I'm doing cast shadows. And this part right here is supposed to be an alternate arm, so I know that that's also just to give a little bit more sense of depth. And I'm going to have to go back and clean some of this up, but And so I know that this most of the body right here is going to be in shadow. I kind of want to imply that his torso is sticking out a little bit and kind of creating a little bit of a curve. So I'm not going to fully cover this bottom part in shadow, just to give a little bit of the illusion that it's kind of twisting out and that this might be hitting a little bit of light from the back. And kind of the same thing with this arm. So I know that more than likely that this part right here is probably going to be at least covered in shadow, but as this arm extends out, it's going to kind of come away from the underside of his head. So it's going to be getting a little bit of light from this side. Um, and likewise, because this is very far sticking out in front, this will get shadow, but it will be not as, it won't be cast shadow from the other side of his head. But I do know that just because this is a sphere, there's going to be a little bit of shadow underneath here. Um, and then I'll just fill in all the back here and just again, just kind of separate out the planes on this a little bit. And then the front of the face is going to be pretty much covered as well. This will change a little bit, but and then the front of the hat. And I'll fix this up a little bit, but just want to get the general shapes going right now. So that's looking pretty good, at least for the first pass. That's actually more just the cast shadow of his head and sort of the larger forms on his body. Now what I'm going to do is start going in and kind of define the shadows relative to the light source a little bit more. So things like these sections right here, which are designed to be built or designed to be kind of three-dimensional in nature because they're, it's a machine that tend to have parts that extrude, I know are going to have some shadow on them. Kind of same coming down here. Just trying to clean up some of that stuff. And I guess this is probably going to be mostly caved in as well. And then this part of his arm, this underneath section, and I'm actually probably going to go in and do some kind of like light effect underneath these arms just to kind of give a sense that there's some like energy bond holding this stuff together. This arm's going to be a little trickier because of this sort of a little shadow underneath here. But it's going to have a lot of light coming out and hitting it because it is kind of like the foremost sticking out thing. And these sections are going to have shadow on them because it's implying that this section of his arm is actually in front of this section of his arm. So that will be casting a shadow on that. All right. Let's see. Kind of blocking in. There's probably an exact science to some of this. I mean, there is factually an exact science to a lot of this, but some of it too was just looking at it and kind of seeing some of these folds and stuff, just kind of how to demonstrate what it is that's going on in that material or in that thing. Alright, so we got a good base layer shadows. I'm realizing there's a few spots of color that I kind of want to separate. So this section right here, I know that I want it to, that also needs to be. I'm just going to go and clean this up real quick. And again, if I was kind of doing this with a little more time and a little bit more methodically, I would probably mask this out so I avoid getting some of this like bleed out of the lines. This is kind of a faster way of doing stuff. Um, like going from a dead start to coloring and working on something. Um, Another things to think about too, kind of just as you're thinking where you're going to go with color down the road, is what material this is. And I know that because I want this to look kind of loud, I'm going to have it be a shiny metal. Not all metals shiny. You can have matte finishes on stuff. But just thinking about kind of not only where the shadow is going to be, but how light is going to be cast off the material, because that can definitely influence what people interpret the material that you're working on as. How's it going, Animation Crate? Crate? Yeah, Crate. So I see that 2 more people joined since I started working on this. Right now I'm working on this kind of like goofy robot distraction-y. It's basically just a distracting kind of clowny robot. I'm going through right now, just doing my basic color values for kind of a cell shaded style. All right, drop that back on top, and just for the sake of experimentation, I'm gonna go through and see how the shadow, kind of like that actually. Um, it's a little softer, and it kind of gives a little bit of a sense of a blue shadow. Um, all right. I just wanted to do the 2 things that so I wanted to fix. This part is like the internal part of the robot, so I didn't want it to be pink. I wanted it to read as another type of like less polished finished metal. Um, Nope. All right, and we'll do that in here as well, and in here. All right. Okay. So now I'm going to go through and start kind of beefing up the shadows and assigning, like just establishing kind of more of a range of values just to break up the shapes a little bit more. I probably will do this one or two times. I'll probably do another shadow layer, a highlight layer, and then maybe a final shadow layer, but I might just add a gradient depending upon how I'm feeling. So I know that there are certain things that I'm going to want to separate even more from where there's already shadow. Like these parts in here are the same value as everything else, so it's not showing the depth that I want it to. So I'm going to go back up here, choose the same gray value, drop that back to, I guess it was pin light, and then start going on top of that. So let's see. I know it's, I don't think that's going to be dark enough. Or I need to, yeah, that's the dark light. So yeah, there you go. So now that like this section in here, and this is another case where you might even do a third shadow layer because this is separating the value from the rest of it, but even inside this thing, there's going to be its own range of values. Um, and those kinds of things are worth thinking about. I mean, you can do something really quick and just kind of two-tonally or three-tonally, but if you really want to give that sense of depth and like that'll be what really kind of makes your drawing pop. So you can already see that there's a difference of depth and that this thing is kind of nestled within this other thing. And then on top of that, other places like here, you can go in. These are going to be a little less necessary to really go in and like do value on value layer after value layer, but I'll do a little bit of one. And that kind of gives a sense that that's concave, but it's in the wrong direction. And it's partly because this is supposed to be this color. All right, and now I kind of established that those are separate parts, and now I want to kind of go in and just establish, break up some of the other parts. Again, basing this off of the light source that I defined, so things like right here, just pull that shape out a bit. This arm right here is going to be casting a little bit of shadow down onto this part of the like shoulder type thing. So we're going to add that in, just make sure that all of the limbs are casting shadow in the direction, somewhat relatively in the direction that they're facing. It might actually be a little bit more directionally that way. Yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit more like that. Just kind of go through here. I guess I could. No. Again, I'm just kind of just making sure I'm acknowledging it, light source in at least a little bit, just filling these shapes back in. So already you can kind of see there's a good range of values kind of denoting where certain parts are in relation to others. This head is probably going to cast, like it's already shadowing everything, but it's also going to cast like a more direct shadow, and that's going to probably be over most of this part of the torso. which in turn would mean I have to end up probably filling all of this in. So filling it all in. Then maybe like that. Yeah, kind of liking where that's going. And I'm going to separate the torso, because the torso is actually underneath everything, because he's kind of twisting. That actually means this is all going to be there too. But I left this section out because I'm trying to kind of give it the sense that it's maybe getting a little bit of light coming from the back. Starting to like that. I am noticing as I'm getting darker values that copy that. I'm gonna want to. I'm gonna want to make my line art a little bit darker because it's starting to blend in a little bit. I might change that back out once I kind of reach my final values, but for right now, I just want to be able to see how everything is sitting. So. Oop. I'm just dropping the contrast on this a little bit, or upping it so I can see the lines a little bit better. Okay, there we go. All right. Put it together around that one, but all right. Keep going. Should come along pretty nice. You know, it's a Game Boy now. I don't want him to have too many phones. Plus, since we're not using this we're probably not going to be using this for at least right now. I'm just playing around. Alright, so there's still a few more spots that I kind of want to define a little bit more just because I don't think they're reading quite as well, and I want to make sure that there's the depth that I want on this. So I'm going to go in and just define those real quick, then I'm probably going to add highlights and then start playing around with kind of doing some detailing on them. Make them really kind of pop. So some of these are going to be a little interesting. I know that just based off of, practice and stuff, some of the cylindrical shapes are a little weird in that the way that the light hits them you're always going to get a little bit of highlight somewhat on both sides, not all the time, but especially because these are close to the end of where the light would be hitting it. Second case. Yeah, so I'm going to mostly shade this in, but I'm just going to leave a little bit of hint of the other color of the shadow on this side. You can see that's kind of what I did over there too, but some of these are also getting cast shadows, so they're going to be obscured anyway. I know that this chest plate is separate from this, so I want to make sure that that's reading as its own separate thing. And then this part right here is the shoulder that's kind of pushed back. So, and I'm just going to fill in some of this stuff just to give it a little bit more of a. And again, these are things that are supposed to have some depth to them, so I'm just making sure they read as that. You can tell even just kind of zooming out that adds a nice little kind of separation of some of the planes in that, and then go back through and still just kind of define some of these shapes right here. Now that I'm looking at it, I'm just going to do a one giant square over this section of the body just because the shape of the shadow that the head would be casting itself would be a big square. And being careful to make sure that if I'm doing that, I'm following kind of the curves of what that would look like. Yeah, something like that. All right. And actually, there would probably be a shadow of this arm being cast on that right there. So do another like, just kind of. I'll go one layer above just to get it. Nope. And these are things that are like aren't necessary. I think to a certain extent they are, just because objects have a certain way of interacting with each other, and the more that you can kind of communicate that, I think the more like realistic or whatever kind of way you want to describe that your drawing can look. And that also comes with identifying the correct shape of the shadow. So like if this is hitting this cylindrical thing, the shadow is going to look cylindrical. Likewise, if it's traveling down here, just kind of make sure that it keeps the shape of the, and it's also going to be a little behind where this shadow right here is, because it's hitting that shadow and it's hitting down here. So it's not exact, but it does kind of communicate that a little bit. I'm actually going to want to cover this too, because this right here not only is underneath that, but it's getting a shadow cast on it by this cylindrical part. But I'm actually going to do this on maybe a little lower layer, so it's not that dark. Maybe like that, and then just the top part, or the interior, something like that. Yeah. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of do some shadows in here just to pop this out a little bit. Although, now that I'm thinking about it, this is going to be casting a light, so most of the shadow that's inside of here is probably going to be on the rims around here. And then there's going to be light on the inside, so I'm actually not going to touch that right now. Another hour or so on this, so I'm going to get to some of the more fun stuff soon. All right. Do something with the glasses too, just because. All right, let's shoot. And right now I'm just kind of going through on this hat, making sure that there's enough detail to show that it's kind of floppy. That's pretty good. All right, so I'm gonna start adding highlights. Highlights are kind of important. Just they establish like a lighter. I mean, obviously they establish a highlight. So I'm probably gonna do just a general highlight, and then a highlight that just makes sure it reads as metal. So go to the top here, pick a lighter color. You can pick, sometimes you can pick a lighter color of your base color. I'm going to see how that looks when I start to mess around with it. I might choose some kind of yellow, just to kind of give the sense of more of a natural light. But I'm feeling that the rim light that I want to put on this is something I'll talk about at the end is going to be more of a neon color, so I'm not sure I want to go with a yellow light for right now at least. So it's looking like, because this color is so light, it's having a hard time reading that. So yeah, it's 6 super. Nope. So that's actually kind of what I'm looking for, that color. So I'm working off of luminosity right now, and that's just applying the the lightness of that color to the topmost layer. And I'm gonna do this real rough real quick just to see if I like how that looks. And one of the interesting things too about doing a highlight like this, right, is that it kind of tricks your mind into thinking that like the rest of the body might actually be a different color than what I established it as. So you could say that maybe now that I've done this, technically the color of the robot is this lighter pink as opposed to this darker pink, and that the rest of it is a shadow in and of itself. That might be a little extreme for what I'm looking for right now, which I think it is, but like you can kind of trick people into thinking there's another tone there than there actually is. So I'll stick with this for right now. And I'm noticing too that I'm gonna have to go back and add a cast shadow to this section right here. But in the meantime, I'm just gonna kind of fix this up a little bit. And I'm gonna be a little bit more methodical about this just to make sure that everything tracks correctly. And I'm actually starting to kind of dig this. I'm thinking it's looking pretty rad. Rad is an industry term for cool. And even though these are technically shadows that I'm drawing this on top of, everything gets hit with a little bit of light, especially if it's towards the rim of whatever it is that you're working with. And metal specifically will carry a little bit more of a luster than if this was like stone or rock. I mean, there'd still be a little bit of highlight there, but it would track. And that again goes back to thinking about what is the material of, or what the material of the thing that you're drawing actually is. I'm liking where that's going, so let's close it off a little bit. Um, and because I did that, I'm gonna have to go on top of everything right here and do another shadow layer for this pauldron shoulder thing right here, just because it needs to cast a shadow on the side of his head. Yep. And again, just making sure that that shadow is the right shape. It should probably be a little bit more like that to imply a little. And maybe we'll do a little bit right there too. Yeah, like that.
5-1 Toronto.
In case anyone was wondering, it's 5-1 in favor of Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
This is normal.
Oh, that's the score? Yeah. Yeah, I saw earlier. Unfortunate. Are there any Toronto fans watching the stream right now? Please sign off.
And ask your team to stop throwing things.
Excuse me 1 second. So I wasn't feeling totally that color before, so I'm actually going to play around with this a little bit, do something like that, and then add a rim light to that. All right, so I'm gonna go back and add some metal highlights to make it look more metal, but right now I'm gonna go and start kind of just messing around with the values a little bit more, just as we get to kind of the final value section of it. And I like to use a gradient for this just because it can kind of blend things a little bit without blending them too much. And I'm going to go through, just drop this on top of everything. And I made a shape instead of a gradient, so everything's going to go mixed up. Do something like that, and then overlay it on top of everything, or do a hard light. I think that was dark enough, or in the right direction. So I'm going to do it this way, and then drop the hard light. Yeah, there we go. Especially with something like metal too, you can kind of get a little bit of like a nice blurred out edge, and I think that looks kind of cool. And I'm just going to do that for everything on the bottom part of this, and maybe a little bit over here, but I'm just making sure that I'm adhering to the shapes that I want, because you don't want the gradient to be like at a weird angle, because that can kind of make the perspective look a little bit off. Not sure I like where that's placed. Actually, I established the values pretty well for myself, so I'm not sure I want to do too much of this, but I'll probably do it around here too. So I'm pretty happy with this and kind of with demonstrating all the things that I needed to do. So I think I'm going to go and start kind of doing some of the detailing. Before I do that, I'm going to just save this all out as a folder. I'll do this as color/value, and then I'm going to duplicate that folder. And some of this stuff over here I'll finish up. I want to kind of get the robot itself a little bit just because I only have about 44 more minutes. So I'm going to, outside of the line art, I'm going to merge all these layers. And what that's going to let me do is go through and kind of see where there's bleed over and just kind of clean some stuff up a little bit. And then I'm actually going to just use a brush right now, and if I see a color that I need to fix up, I'm going to just kind of do it that way.
Like a lot of times when I use a palm does it and I have a good face mesh, when I go to project it, none of the projections work. The only time it's ever projected and works was the spot.
And I notice things like right here, there should be a little bit of cast shadow from that hand.
Every other time when I sculpt it, I just follow the other way.
Something like that.
I don't know. But I'm like re-apologizing on the same,
And I'm also just giving a little bit of depth to these fingers. And just whatever this thing is. And I didn't spend too much time on this line art drawing just because we weren't sure if we were going to use it or not. So there's things about it that I would probably fix up if I had more time, but just for the sake of the stream, I'm just going to go with what I already have. Let's clean up some of these edges. Filling this stuff in right here. Great. Cool. Alright, sorry about that. I accidentally pulled the camera. Alright. Alright, so now I'm going to go through and start doing some of the detailing, and it's going to start with this part right here, because I want this to be some kind of energy core. And there's a few ways you can do that. I'm going to do, I think, this with a screen brush mode, so I'm going to go up to my brush modes, and I'm going to go to screen, and then pick a lighter blue, and then just kind of start doing that, and that's too light. There we go. One of the things you want to make sure you're doing with something like this, though, is that you don't pick your brush up as you're making your shape, because then it'll start to apply that glow layer, or that glow effect. Sure, I want to do it this way. I do want to zoom in a little bit more, and then also clean this up a little bit in here. It's kind of sloppy. Should be. All right. Let me do this a little differently. I'm going to go on top of the line art, and I'm first going to add a white layer around it. And then I'm going to probably add a glow to this. And I want that glow to be like a bright turquoise. And do a color dodge. Screen maybe? Yeah, there we go. Alright. There's no exactness to what I'm doing in terms of just you're trying to just make it look good. And then I'm actually going to now start going in. So I like kind of what that is doing, but I think that the color underneath it needs to be a little bit more vibrant. So I'm going to go back in here, pick an obnoxious blue. There we go, yeah. And that's looking a little bit more like what I want. And there's a few ways I can kind of keep going, like tweaking around this, but I like kind of where it's at. And I'm going to go back up here to my glow layer. Now I'm going to go to the screen. And now you can really kind of get that like glow effect. Yeah, like I like where that's going. But because we've now defined that as like its own light source, we then have to kind of go in around it and then make everything look like it's reflecting the light, and that'll really make this pop too. So I'm gonna do something. I'm going to take this this color that's on the inside of this, and I'm going to kind of just start to trace around where the light would be shining. And for right now, I'm just making sure that this light is kind of reflecting where it should. I'm going to go back and kind of play around with it a little bit to make sure to make it look a little bit more like it's radiating light. But for right now, I'm just trying to kind of define where it is going to exist. Which is mostly just going to be around this like stomach area right here. And this is why I decided not to go too hard in on the color on the inside of this, because I knew that it was going to be reflecting light off of this. I'm actually going to have to go up here and darken this up. So I'm having a hard time seeing. There we go. Okay. So having a hard time seeing this little spot right there. Alright, so now you can kind of see on the inside of that, there's this light reflecting off of the kind of power source, and I'm going to copy the effect of the glow on top of here. Copy layer style. And then I'm going to paste layer style. And there you go, you can kind of see that it looks like there's a light inside of there, and it's kind of being casted. And I'm going to play around with it a little bit. It seems a little too bright relative. So I'm actually going to go through, see blending mode, see if that kind of lends itself a little bit more to a little more subdued looking. And it doesn't super look like it. So I'm going to go and play around with the glow itself. We got the range.
Side by side. We have
What I might do actually is in here and go in with the gradient tool. Take that same color, do a little bit of a gradient. Yeah, that looks much better. And that'll kind of diffuse the light out a little bit, make it look a little bit more. Yeah. That also means that this right here has to be pretty much this color.
I don't know, that's up for debate. I wanted to still, on this screen, put the Kuiper belt on the outside here.
It's pronounced Cooper.
circles out.
Yeah.
And put that on the outside here, along with, you know, the same kind of setup like this is, so it's still cookable.
Yeah, I'm really liking how that's looking.
We should just leave them all.
And do the same thing on the inside up here.
So this is how it looks. Look Mars, Mars, Jupiter.
And there, yeah, you really get a sense now that that's casting its own kind of light in there. And I could probably add a little bit more room light around some of this stuff.
It's pronounced like Viper.
That's what I have currently. And like I said, if you like that, the only thing I was saying is to update the Astro belt and then to do something cool like that with.
Yeah, I really like how that's coming out, how it's looking. And that also, like something like this, can really help to serve you bring an alternate light source and an alternate source of color into that. Like it was looking pretty purple. And what this does is really kind of separate some of those tones or values, tones. And actually, just while I'm kind of playing around with this glow style, I am going to not do that. I'm going to select all this gray or green color, because these are supposed to be like computer eyes.
I mean, once you take that, then it gets you.
Yeah.
And I'm actually going to see what happens if create a new layer.
I think maybe
Take that same color, just kind of go over everything. And then I'm going to apply that layer style. So that's kind of cool. I like what that's implying. It's not the correct color, but let's go in here and I'm going to choose maybe that greenish color.
I'm thinking maybe this orbiting thing is just raises too many questions.
Let's see what color dodge looks like. Nah, it's got to be screen. Screen.
I don't like the Wi-Fi one.
Yeah. It also means that I'm going to have to go in and add room light to the glasses, which I should probably shade anyway, but I'm not going to be able to do everything.
But I don't like it.
Yeah, I would take that one too.
Yeah, because it is a bright color.
Well, and switch back to the other piece. It's not, there's not enough detail. It's not big enough to actually see what it is. It's just sort of, it's lost.
That was the issue that I was having with it.
So I agree.
Yeah, man. Outer orbit and inner orbit change.
Good job of putting everything here.
Thanks. These are the actual size references, well, except for the sign. But these are the actual size references of the plants to one another.
Yeah, it's pretty red.
So
I have a few light sources. I'm actually going to kind of tone down this a little bit, just it's a little too close to the...
this is probably
Dealing
one
right now,
of
man.
the most challenging
The whole database.
projects that I worked on here.
Just a little bit more, just because it's close, we'll do a little right there.
I think that the orbiting thing is kind of just too much trouble because
So actually, because this is a screen, I'm going to go in here, turn off my pen pressure, so I get a like just a continuous line, and I'm just going to go through here.
they're not just circles now, they're sort of a block, and they're going to overlap each other as they orbit. It's just unavoidable.
Can
We
we
just don't have enough scale, enough space to have it orbit and be comfortable.
Let's go through and erase some of the line sections across the sunglasses.
in one regard, I want to do stuff to see what it looks like. Like, I want to see, like, how you would play with that kind of stuff. Can you do that with
Yeah.
I mean,
And that really starts to make it pop. I mean, you can see it's just like, and now you got a few light sources, you're breaking up the color a little bit, getting some light effects going in there.
Neptune, it's out here, then it's God, yeah.
I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm actually gonna
And
where this
everything.
other glow layer was.
I mean, well,
I go
we
in
could
here.
Shrink it. We could shrink the whole
Start
thing,
doing some
but you can shrink the whole thing so that all the orbits fit within the screen,
this one, sorry.
Yeah.
so the orbit doesn't go off, and then the entire scale will be relative to each other, like that.
Have to be smaller still. They would have to carry this one. Like for that.
And I'm gonna do that for every spot where those things are, just because it'll add a little bit interesting light stuff to it, and imply maybe there's like some kind of energy thing there.
Yeah, that was just on line markers to
Oh.
make sure that they were in the same space.
I actually like this better.
This?
Without the lines up like that.
Yeah.
I thought they were part of the.
No, the lines are just for my rulers. I need to make sure that
The colors, the blue was, was intentional.
Because it's reminiscent of this.
Yeah, but I think you're right. Well, I mean, that's much better. It feels. And if you made the labels bigger and brought this down.
Yeah. That's
And just because I'm gonna do that same effect that I did down there, I'm gonna go in with the gradient and then just kind of.
But it doesn't change the.
There we go.
The overlap is things.
Yeah, that's looking cool.
Yeah. I think that's kind of.
And there's still, obviously, you can tell there's some rough stuff right here. I'm just kind of doing this as fast as I can to just kind of get all the steps of what I would do in a situation like this.
It's just. We would have to make things small enough to have enough.
And I know too that like right here is implying a propeller, and you have this kind of like cybernetic demon that has this like weird unnatural energy source and like robot parts. So it's weird that it'd be using a propeller as a source of momentum, but like we'll just call it like a quantum propeller or something.
Alrighty, thanks. Thank you. I'm gonna head up.
Alright.
Yeah.
Because if you add quantum to anything, it makes it sound more rad. And because we've now established those light sources, we then need to bounce that light off of some of the other parts of this just to bring it back. So like that, just kind of get in there. Yeah, right there. And I'm actually going to be right back because I'm sitting next to the spinach that I ate for lunch and it's starting to smell like the Whole Foods produce section. So.
Hey Steve, are you leaving right now? Excuse me? Are you leaving now?
Yep.
Before you go.
Yeah.
Ooh. Wow, can you make it bigger?
What's up?
So you want to take a look at this?
Yeah.
Yes. I don't see how anybody would have any problems with that whatsoever.
You'd be surprised.
I think it's great.
Okay.
Oh, well, you know, the road is so tiny.
Yeah. Well, so the thing is that
I know there's, if you want all of this stuff in there. So what I was thinking was maybe we can go back to the idea of the food being sort of disembodied, and it just that way you could bring the whole dash down a little bit.
well, if I disembodied the food, what I'd probably do is just something like this, and then move the top up or something like that.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't see like the seats or anything.
All right,
You just see the wheel.
But that would be my major criticism is that the road is neat enough.
So
This is
trying to
where-
think of where to
this is
go
where the
from here.
driving is gonna be.
Because
Yeah, but the other thing to remember is that like this won't always
I
be down, and we can
I
move the
think
roof
what I'm
up
gonna
a
do
little
is I'm just
bit
gonna
if we
add a
wanted
few
to.
more
We can also
highlights,
we can also move and move up.
and then maybe add a few more colors. I'm probably going to stream for about another 20 minutes, just see how far I get in that.
Where it is.
Um,
And then don't worry about it. This is not something we're putting in a game. This is simply the concept across. So I would just don't worry about it.
and let's see.
But yeah, I think it looks great.
Okay. Cool.
Wow. These work really well.
That's why they pay me the big bucks.
It's great having such a good team.
I don't know.
I've had
Yeah, no, it's nice. I mean, this is.
Andrew Minty, this is the best art team we've ever
I
had.
really thought, like,
Well, glad to
You
hear
guys
it.
are awesome.
Glad to hear it. Always nice to get the compliments.
It's like, I think it's better than having to deal with Zoom. I don't know when. I was prepared to try to make that up.
Let's see. All right, keep going at this.
I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, for in-router, if they're forced to have static screens, then that's what we do. I like having the smaller button.
You mean this button?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Because they don't,
Yeah, it's not liking how that's looking.
Yeah, so right now he has to do large scale for the planets, all of them, which those are pretty much done. All of the moons of Jupiter are done, large scale and small. Has to do all of the moons,
Cool.
all the major moons of the planets.
It's gonna probably be that major source that indicates where the light's hitting it. I'm not super into that color.
I mean, Mars is 2 moons.
Part of that is that it's catching things that it shouldn't be catching and giving that highlight. So if I fix that, that'll.
Neptune's 1. And he said that we can
Should
go
be catching
to
right
all of
here.
those as in this screen to see like a large scale of it, as well as the 2 asteroid belts.
Yeah,
What I might do is just kind of color correct this a little bit, just because I think it's a little bit too bright.
Do you have a texture or anything? Kind of like.
Like in theory what it's doing, but not necessarily the color that it's doing that with.
We use like kind of like just some sort of preset that we could probably add it a little bit in
I like this, but I don't like.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Cool static image.
That would be neat.
Yeah, I can do that.
So yeah, so when you click on asteroid belt, it's gonna.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Information within.
So all of a sudden, in doing this, I've established a different tone and color for the light and kind of set up. And probably not as much, maybe going a little like that. But yeah, I like that. It brings a little warmth into the purple. I know purple is a red derivative, so in a sense it's a little warm, but it's actually pretty cool.
On both, because they're to scale with each other right now.
So I'm trying to bring some of that warmth back into it.
Yeah, these are the scale that they are.
I really like how that's.
For one, these are definitely going to intersect, and two, like I think
What's
actually
gonna intersect?
Mars or Earth and Venus when they go past each other.
That's one of the things he said he was trying to cut. Was it orbiting? So it would literally be.
I mean, we're not going to pan.
And because of that,
Why are we taking all the cool stuff?
let's see what that normal
Okay,
color
well,
is.
Guess we'll talk about
I guess
that.
it's this color.
Even
So
so, I feel like almost like
we're doing
having
hue.
bigger makes it, I don't know,
So that was one of the things that he
I'd
was
scale
saying
everything down.
with this one, right? So like, okay, if you take this.
I'm not going to go through down here and some of the other spots where there's a highlight and just kind of add that color into it.
One
I
of the things
think.
he was saying is that it'll be too small to matter within that
No, I think
situation.
all the orbit lines the same, just scale it down a little bit individually.
Yeah.
The orbit line is up the same, and Neptune goes off orbit off screen, which is why again pan and zoom would like really play into this portion.
Just kind of bringing that
Even
color
at-
back in
even at
certain
this
spots.
size, it's fine because it can pan around, and that's
Yeah,
not a big deal.
Yeah, that warmth is really nice. I'm trying to make sure I don't clip some of the other values just so.
Yeah, we can definitely leave because I don't think they need to be that big. 'Cause I'm thinking like that's
Cool.
gonna be blown up. Even at this size, it's like it's easily big enough to be able to see. We don't need to see detail of it as much as like we see Mercury.
And if I don't finish this,
we don't like this
still watching.
This is more to see the planets.
I'll probably at some point be finishing this in just a VOD. I mean, there's not that much more to do. I gotta probably fix up this hand right here and then add the finishing touches to the rest of this thing. But for right now, I think it's kind of it's starting to get to a pretty good place. Not starting to, is in a pretty good place. So it's not quite done, but
So visualize.
I'd say it's like 85% of the way there.
Created some new backgrounds, so probably bring it more towards yours. Well, if the database is running all the backgrounds anyways, it's all kind of stuff together. So I want to do that. I put that on hold just because we were waiting for Chris to test that. People.
Yeah.
So you got good feedback. So Steve, I think was pretty much like, all right, cool. I guess we should do it then.
Yeah.
So now it's just a matter of.
So we did get good feedback on it?
Yeah. Chris posted something yesterday. So yeah, I think we'll do that.
Did you increase on it?
Did not. Head on over there.
Yeah.
All right, there it is. So, I'm trying to figure out now. Database just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Like, oh, let's just
Where you guys heading?
What's in there?
So now we got objectives, velocity, animations, achievements, collections. Collections, we have items, collection observations. That's sort of like a really good idea to have
I'm at least just gonna finish these. I'll color these in just so they're colored in. These are supposed to be phones. The idea was he was taking selfies of himself. Do this. Actually, let's see if something will work real quick. So I'm going to merge all of these layers. Cut this, undo all that. Why to see if this would work. Yeah, that actually works. That's hilarious. Basically what I was doing there is I was seeing if I could flip this thing and make it look like he was taking a selfie of himself, but from behind, which actually worked. And there's no real background, so for the time being, I'll just do this. While I'm thinking about it, I'm going to save this. Okay. So the last few things that I could do, I could finish this Game Boy out. I could fix up the glasses a little bit just to polish that. But I think I'll finish the Game Boy real quick and then. that, yeah, I'll just do the propeller stuff. This is implying a flash, but that was just for my own placement. Do some kind of like. This is just a lasso tool. Doesn't look like garbage. Yeah, we can fudge just a little bit. Make it like blue or something. Yeah. All right. Call that a flash. I don't know. This is why it's important to keep track of your layers. Alright, so yeah, it's somewhat of a flash. Fix it, make it look a little. The same thing for this, just give it a little sense of some kind of action or something. Actually, I can do that. Alright, now the final thing is I'm probably just gonna make this propeller look like it's actually moving. I'm gonna use the same color as take this, go back to my, just get rid of this maybe. Nope. Let's get rid of this. I'll go back down here and just kind of start implying some kind of movement. This does not have shape dynamics attached anymore. Back, make sure those are on. And just kind of give it like the little energy. Kind of thing. All right. Kind of liking where that's headed, but I think for right now I'm gonna call it on this because I can keep kind of tinkering it with a little. I can keep tinkering with it a little bit, but like all the basic things are there. You gotta kind of get a sense of where all the shadows are, kind of how I build out shapes, how I do some additional lighting. I probably would put a background on this. I mean, I would put a background on this, and then kind of introduce some of the background light back in just to make it pop. But for right now, you kind of can see where all the light sources are and kind of how everything comes together. So I think unless there's any questions, I'm just gonna call it here. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll be back next Friday. I'm not exactly sure what we'll be doing, but it'll be something cool. You can follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/diggagames, and follow us on Instagram, same handle. And we'll be back next week. Thank you guys for watching.